All right. Hello, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. See, I got it all right because I've had plenty of coffee today. My name is Frank Lavinia. And if you're new here, you can check me out at the following URLs: franksworld.com, datadriven.tv, and impactquantum.com. As you can see, I have switched to a reusable thermos for my coffee enjoyment. It's a Weimaraner mug my wife had gotten me. We're now in our second Weimaraner, and they are great dogs. I just recommend that you do your research before you get them. We were introduced to the breed because we actually fostered a Weim, and she was 6 years old when we got her. She passed away in January. And long story short, there was a Weimaraner shaped hole in her heart, so we got a Weimaraner puppy. Weimaraner puppies are very energetic, as we're finding out. As you can see, I'm actually at the new house. I'm still working on moving some of the stuff. You'll see I do have my fedora. I do have my poster of the Rocinante. And I also have something that has been in my, um, not within view of the camera, but it's a keepsake I got from the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin. About 2001, I think it was when I was there. It's basically a border sign, and it's in German, Russian, French, and English. And the big words there are Grenzgebiet, or border area. So it's pretty cool. I don't know. I like it. That was one of the first things I hung up in the new house, and hopefully, I'll have everything kind of set up. You'll probably have noticed that the audio is kind of a bit echoey. I'm working on that. I'm this Since this room is so much nicer than the old office. I'll probably have to put up acoustic panels and stuff like that. And there's actually a really cool video I saw online about DIY acoustic panels. Today's Thursday thought is about let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Chrome tab, window, just in case I want to share another one. So this here is something I want to share with everyone on the interwebs is no more cellar dwelling. Yes. How's it going, Thomas? Good to see you. Good to see you. No more cellar dwelling. Well, technically, I am still in the cellar. It's just this is a nicer cellar to be stuck in. Um, one of the things that we actually put in, like we had little cave basement windows in the old house. We actually put in like full size windows there. But as you can tell from here, the lighting here is so much better than natural lighting. And in fact, I can actually look out, and I think right now there's a cherry blossom tree. At least I think it's a cherry blossom tree. At the end of the day, I'm still a city boy, just living in the country. Our new house has about 4 acres, and I basically have a beautiful view um, to that. Let me see if I can tilt the camera without breaking too much. There we go. All right. I'll have to do a tour, but there's the window. It's a full size window. I have fancy double doors behind me. It's really cool. I love the new office. I can't wait to have all my monitors and stuff in here. But yeah, no more Hobbit. I'm technically a Hobbit, maybe just a higher grade of Hobbit now. Um, that's the thing I wanted to show you today is that there's a new magazine, at least new to me, called Data Platform Geeks Magazine. And lo and behold, I only found out about this because a colleague of mine, thank you, Thomas. Thank you. This is, haven't moved in 14 years. So it's a little, I was 14 years younger last time I moved. And I had, 0 kids. Andy, my brother from another mother. How's it going, man? I was just thinking I should do a stream. Actually, one of these days, Andy, you and I should do a stream together again because people like to hear us talk. So that'd be cool. So actually, Andy, I'm glad you're on here. So check this out. It's a magazine. um, One of the things that I kind of been thinking about is starting a magazine and it's interesting. I want to learn more about this and like what they do and how they get it working. But it's pretty interesting what they got, you know. Um, so in the table of contents, colleague of mine, Will McGrath, has a deep dive look into a product that is near and dear to my heart, Red Hat OpenShift Data Science. And I know someone who's been thinking about a magazine. Yes. And that's someone even has a domain name. And I'm hired to see that this idea is catching on. I think that one of the things we're seeing is the diversification of media, right? Kind of like how would you consume media? And how would you consume technical content? And this is actually something that's been since the topic of the stream is Thursday thoughts. I can be rather loosey goosey with what I talk about, but as I'm going through cleaning up the old house and stuff like that, I threw out a lot of books. Well, I recycled a lot of books. Right now, I know there's donation piles and stuff like that, but honestly, if you are in the year 2022 looking at a Silverlight 2 book, you have big problems. That's not going to be for you. Um, there are some books I kept. The only Silverlight book I kept actually was mine that I wrote, and Pete Brown's because he signed it. Anytime an author signed a book, I keep it. So actually, I have a book by former colleague Andrew Duthie, who wrote one of the earliest ASP.NET books. So shout out to you, Andrew, if you're out there on the LinkedIn's watching. And of course, any books of Andy's that I have, but those are more relevant because those are more data related, not necessarily. So a UX platform doesn't exist anymore. But this got me thinking: is that all the books I used to buy, and I still buy books. Don't get me wrong; there are usually audiobooks. I tend to read nonfiction now. But when I want to learn new technology, chances are, like 10 years ago, I would say the change I've really has been the last 5 years, 6 years. Prior to that, I mean, you go to the store, you get a book, right? You get the O'Reilly book, right? That's usually about this thick. You read that cover to cover, you're pretty much an expert in a technology. What has changed, at least for me, and let me know in the comments or on the live stream, the live stream, is that ultimately, I think that the first place I'm going to go is YouTube. Honestly, first place I go to learn something new as I go to YouTube, and then I'll hit Google or Bing, and I'll read articles on a given topic. But I'm not as likely to buy a hardbound book like I used to, with the exception of the stuff that goes out on Humble Bundle, right? So let me share that. This being the exception, now that I think of it. Okay, let's see if I can shrink this. How's that? With the exception of Humble Bundle. And Humble Bundle is it's just too good to pass up, right? So if you go to humblebundle.com, I'll put this up. They don't pay me to promote this. I'm just a big fan of what they do, honestly. Come on. I know I have it. Um, hey, Thomas. For some reason, I get the feeling that you and Andy are two would be great using the Click and Clack Tappet Brothers podcast format. All right, I totally need to check that out now. I think I know what you mean, but I think we kind of do that already. But we should maybe, Andy, that's the secret. That's why people like the shows when it's just you and me, or the live streams are just you and me, because we do that click and clack thing. You know, especially when we get our Bailey on the show and she introduces the show. She got the British accent. I've obviously got the Northeast, the New York thing going on, and you, of course, Andy, have no accent, but. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to say bundles, books, and I know it's not shared perfectly. So here's all the books that they got here. Programming Bootcamp. I do buy these books. I will admit I do buy these books, but they're ebooks. I can put them on my Kindle or whatnot. But when I compare the amount of books, that's right. There's some people know with the accent. Um, it's really funny was um, I didn't know my parents had an accent until I lived in Europe for a while, and I kind of picked more of a generic American style accent. And then my parents came over, and I'm like, yeah, I would talk to them, but like it was really when when they came over to visit. God rest their souls now. But I was like, wow, my mom has a real like straight up Queens accent, and I mean Queens, New York, not Queen like England. It's different Queens, I guess. And then my dad had kind of more of a um, like North Jersey generic type thing. Um, even though he's from Staten Island, that's kind of weird. Anyway, I do buy these books, and it's interesting because I actually did a count the other day, and I probably shouldn't admit publicly how many of these bundles I bought over the last 5 years, but I would say it's easily in the hundreds, probably about 250. And when I go and I look, I'm already looking at this. I'm like, "Ooh, I want that one. I want that one. I want that one." But when I look at kind of the amount of books I bought prior to say about 5, 6 years ago, that are physical books, they're a fraction of what I would buy. Um, what I have now. I say it's probably um, 2/3 or whatever electronic now. It's really my physical book buying is definitely slowed down. Um, I usually will buy these. I'll buy some Kindle books because it's 99 cents, or $1.50. You just hit the buy and you have it instantly. There's a certain appeal to that. But when it comes to learning technology, there's definitely this. It used to be you would get the book, right? And for those you understand, right? You would get the big book, O'Reilly book, or the Rocks book with the red, and the pictures of the author. I know Andy wrote a couple of those, and you would read that cover to cover. You'd be the expert. Whereas I think that technology changes so fast now. It takes about, I don't know, Andy, you've written a bunch of books. So it's about a 10 to 12 month process to go from ideation to publishing a book in the traditional way. Um, I also think that magazines also had a 3 month lead. When I was writing for MSD Magazine, there was a 3 month lead, right? So you kind of had if you wanted to do a series, you'd have to think very carefully about what's going to be hot, particularly in AI, because TensorFlow was the hotness. I mean, it still is, but there's certain libraries that kind of get hot, and you can kind of talk about it. One article I wrote was on ML Workbench, Azure ML Workbench, which was, by the time that the article was printed, was actually discontinued. That was fun getting feedback for that one. So you say, yep, a year is a good estimate. So what's interesting is that all of this is to say that if you do have a magazine, it's electronic. You don't have to send it to the publisher. You just basically do it to a PDF or whatever. These folks seem to do it via PDF. You can probably be a lot more agile. I don't know. Andy knows I've been toying around with this magazine idea for a while. You know, and in different levels of kind of seriousness. Here we go. All of this to say is that you can check out this. I'll paste this link into the chat. And I know not everywhere is going to see that. I think LinkedIn is the only one. Let's see. Can I put that up in the caption? No, it'd be a chat. I'll go back and add this, but there's actually a very cool piece by my colleague Will McGrath, and he talks about a deep look at Red Hat OpenShift Data Science, which is a product that I work on and work on getting out there. And let me tell you what makes it exciting from my point of view. So if you've not read my LinkedIn article, so I have a LinkedIn newsletter called Frank Digs Data, and one of them was kind of this positing. This is before I worked at Red Hat. It was actually when I was still at Coverse, where I remember I had this exchange with a CIO of a Defense Department agency. That's all I'll say. And we were going back and forth, and their concern was there's a big player in a certain space. I'm not going to say their name, but they're very proprietary, right? It's not Microsoft, it's not Oracle. Uh, it's a startup that came up probably in the early 2000s, and it's very niche for law enforcement, government, that sort of thing. And their big thing is that everything they do is proprietary. Koverse's big thing is that it was open source. It was based on an open source foundation, and it was basically it will run in AWS and it'll run in Azure. And that got me thinking because this whole exchange I had was she was very intent on saying like, no, 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 no. We have to work with everybody. We don't have any more patience or tolerance for systems that are extremely proprietary. And I was like, well, look, this isn't right. I mean, you run it wherever you want to run it. You run on bare metal. You run it in the cloud. You can run on your own cloud. You can run it, in AWS. You can run on Azure. You could probably get it running on GCP, on Google if you want. You can run it just about anywhere. Realistically, like it's not you're not limited to a particular platform. And that got me thinking about this whole notion of organizations starting to be very hesitant to go all in on cloud vendor X or a product that only runs on cloud vendor X or cloud vendor Y. And at some point in the future, if they wanted to change platforms for whatever reason, right? I mean, real, imagined, legitimate, illegitimate reasons, right? You lose a certain amount of flexibility. I love Azure ML Studio, right? It's an awesome product. But as someone who would try to sell that to an AWS shop, I have an uphill battle to fight. Now, same with SageMaker, right? SageMaker is a cool product too. But if I wanted to sell that to a Microsoft shop, well, it becomes this whole thing. Now, at the end of the day, data scientists work with Jupyter Notebooks or Jupyter Labs, right? Some flavor of the two. They don't care about. Most of them don't care about which cloud it's in. I would say 90% of them don't care. They just want access to good, fast hardware and to get their stuff done quickly. And that is the problem, or that is exactly what Red Hat OpenShift data science solves. Right? You spin up a cluster, you spin it up, it runs. It's based on OpenShift, so anywhere OpenShift will run. Not right now, but soon in the future, it will run there too. Right? So you can get your notebooks up and running on whatever hardware you want. That to me is what we're seeing here, and I wrote this whole thing about it, call it Cloud 3.0, right? Not Web 3.0, not to be confused with that. Well, I can argue that I suppose it's kind of part of that, but it's this idea that you go from, Cloud 1.0 was infrastructure as a service, right? Spin up virtual machines. I don't care where. It doesn't matter where it is. I don't have to care and feed a server. I don't have to requisition it. I don't have to think about where I'm going to put it in the rack. I don't have to care and feed it. I don't have to do all these things. I do have to virtually care and feed it in terms of stalling updates and patches and things like that. But I'm not going to get paged in the middle of the night to swap out a hard drive. I'll get paged maybe in the middle of the night to install an update, right? But that can be automated too. And for those of you wondering, Frank, what's paging? Well, it's kind of like getting a text message on a separate device, but that's a story for the history class to cover. What's interesting about, and then we get Cloud 2.0, right? Now it's all about PaaS, right? Platform as a service, right? I can spin up SQL Server as a platform. I don't have to install patches. I just use it. It's Azure SQL, right? Like I just, I focus on my data and my actual application that I'm writing. Now, I think that what we're looking at here, and I'm not leaving SaaS out, right? Because SaaS is kind of tangential to this conversation. SaaS would be software as a service, right? Salesforce.com is probably the poster child for this, right? It's the idea that I have a CRM. I don't have to install anything. I just go to the website, sign in, enter my stuff, and everything's handled for me. I just worry about my data. That's all I have to worry about. What I think we're seeing is a layer forming that's going to be very PaaS-like, and it's also going to have some IaaS, infrastructure as a service aspects to it as well. I think that what we're seeing is this formulation. Now, the first place I kind of saw it was with Databricks and Snowflake. Databricks, you can run Databricks on AWS. You can run Databricks on Azure. Not sure. I think you can run Databricks now on Google. Yeah, you can run Databricks on Google. Same thing with Snowflake. You can run Snowflake on AWS. You can run on Azure. What your data engineers and your developers are working against isn't AWS, isn't Azure. They're working against Snowflake or Databricks. Now, realistically, in practical terms, where the rubber meets the road, whatever analogy you want to use, you are still going to have to do a lot of work. If you have everything on AWS and you want to move it all over AWS Databricks and you want to move everything over to Azure Databricks, that's not a trivial move because data has a certain amount of gravity, a certain amount of mass to it, but it is at least possible, right? You're not going to have to reinvent everything. You have to move everything, but not reinvent everything. There's a big difference. Um, Whereas if I pick something like Redshift or Synapse, I would have to, for the most part, I'm sure some code would work over, but I have to move everything and reinvent almost everything. And it's not moving is, kind of a fixed cost. Ironically, as I say that, as I'm moving from one house to the other, it doesn't feel like a fixed cost. But when you're moving data, you can kind of estimate what the egress charge would be, right? You kind of know what, you kind of look at the apple, you kind of look at the orange, and you're like, okay, I know how much juice I can squeeze out of this, right? And you kind of know. When it comes to developing, developers are expensive, data engineers are expensive, data scientists are also expensive, right? So moving your entire platform becomes a very big question mark, right? You can go to any of these web providers, they have a calculator. Hey, what's the egress charge on 10 terabytes, right? Like, okay, well, if cloud provider X does something very unsavory, or I want to move, I'm all bent on getting to cloud vendor Y, then I can kind of look at that and can do that because most of my code is going to work anyway, right? There's going to be some configuration files that need changing, but that's not a huge expense. So that gets me thinking, um, what is the future of kind of cloud software or, cloud platforms, right? And I really think that there's a future here that's starting to evolve. I think it started with Snowflake and Databricks, but I think you're going to start seeing other services like Coverse, like Red Hat OpenShift, where, what, if you code OpenShift, you can run anywhere. Right? It doesn't matter. Like where you run it is almost immaterial, right? So it's just in the same way. If I turn on a light switch, right? I mean, honestly, I don't know. Like, especially in a new house, I don't know. Did that come from a nuclear power plant? Did that come from coal? Did that come from solar? Did that come from geothermal? Whatever. I don't know. And most people, even though I say this before Earth Day, most people are not going to care. They just want to know when they flip the switch, light comes on, right? Are there going to be some people that care? Absolutely, right? It takes all types. But the point here is that cloud vendors will also have to adapt because there's going to be this expectation, I think, of flexibility. Not right away. Not even 3 years, but I think in 5 years' time, I think that's going to be the norm where, I want to be able to run my code the way I want on this platform. And these platforms are going to be multi-cloud, basically. And the cloud vendors themselves are going to have to come up with new ways to add value so that you'll run on my cloud first, right? Yeah, I mean, maybe you can shift some workloads over to those people across town, but you're going to want to run on my cloud first because I'm better at providing additional services, or I'm already bundled with licensing. Like, there's going to be competition there. So that's what gets me excited when I look at something like this. Is that this is basically kind of the start of it, of what Red Hat OpenShift Data Science does. Most data scientists, all they want to do is run their code, right? They don't want to mess with hardware. They don't want to have to, wait in line overnight for the GPU truck to come in and get their hands on the bestest, fastest GPUs. They just want to be able to open up a Jupyter notebook or open up some kind of prompt and just start slinging code and slicing and dicing the data. They don't care about the hardware, troubleshooting CUDA drivers. I have a good story about that. They just want to be able to just start working on and figuring stuff out. And that is basically, um, he refers to it as the AI easy button. It's not quite the easy button, but it's the easiest button, definitely, because I don't have to think about it. Look, I love Azure ML. I used to sell Azure ML, right? It's an awesome service. But if I'm talking to a customer that everything they do is AWS, they're going to look at me and laugh, right? That is a big lift. Can it be done? Yeah, I mean, it can be done. But you're already starting with you're already starting a marathon. And I never ran a marathon, but you're already starting a marathon with a 50-pound pack, uphill in the snow with a 50-mile-an-hour gust coming your way, right? But the idea is that the data scientists don't care. right? They want to be able to get to the code right away. So I think in that sense, it is an easy button. It also saves them from having to go to their individual laptops, or one, if you're the person cutting the checks, having all your data scientists with the fanciest laptops, the fanciest GPUs, right? You can use the power of the cloud to kind of abstract away that, or just rent it, so kind of be elastic, right? You're not paying for all this stuff when you're not using it. And it's basically, all of this is open source tooling, right? Most of so um this is based on something called Open Data Hub. And this is really, I think, the start of something um of the future, is the idea that not only are the tools going to be open source, that's already happened, but the tools are going to be deployed in such a way that they're going to be cloud agnostic. You can run it here, you can run it there. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book, right? So you can run it here, you can run it there, you can run it anywhere, right? And I think that then there's some other things that we'll be announcing soon at Red Hat that I think is really going to follow that same philosophy. Are there significant, like, engineering challenges to make it so you can literally pick your workload, right? Like, I can run it here, I can run it there. Yeah, I mean, there are, but that's just, that's going to be figured out. If you think about where we are today versus where we were, say, 20 years ago, the whole notion of downloading music or streaming music as the primary way that people consume music, same thing with video, right? That was unthinkable, right? There were significant engineering challenges that had to be overcome. Here we are, though. It's the default way to consume video or content. I mean, we hooked up with a cable company or whatever here. I have no cable box. I have no desire to sign up and get a cable box because I stream everything. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that was very avant-garde. 20 years ago, that was either impossible or extremely impractical. But here we are. And I think the same thing here, right? I think it's at the point now where it's not impossible. It's very avant-garde, but it's not the norm. And I think what you're going to see is enterprises are not going to have to be joined at the hip at any hip and to join at the hip at any given cloud vendor. This gives them operational flexibility, so they can say one day, we're gonna go here, you can go there. And it could also, I mean, in extreme case, create kind of a market for who's going to be the lowest cost, who's going to be the most efficient. I think that, like any market, it'll evolve and there'll be new value adds. So that's me and my Thursday thoughts. I want to thank you, Thomas. And Microsoft is really on the ball with this. If you notice, like, if you look at a SQL Server can run on premise in a VM. It can run as a managed instance, which is kind of a gray area between platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. And it can also run on containers, right? As part of something called Azure Arc, right? So you can run SQL Server on Azure. You can run on AWS. You could spin up VMs and run on GCP, right? So this is something that I think the big players kind of also see coming, right? Is the idea that they're going to containerize their software so it could run theoretically anywhere. Take a look at what Azure Arc is doing. For me, Azure Arc was kind of like a big aha moment. Like, I guess it really doesn't matter anymore. I mean, it matters where stuff runs, but you definitely have a lot more flexibility in terms of what can run and what can run where. So I think that this is not something that I invented. I think this is just a pattern I see emerging. And I wish I invented it because I could, maybe get a Lambo. I don't know. So with that, I'm going to end the stream. I want to thank you, Thomas and Andy, for commenting live. Really means a lot. If you have any other additional comments or thoughts, please let me know in the comments on whatever platform you're consuming this. And definitely go over and check out his article and check out his magazine. I think it's a cool idea. And he explains kind of the value pitch of what OpenShift data science. We call it roads internally. So where we're going, we will need roads. All right, that's it for me. Little Back to the Future reference for you. I'm going to end this stream and wish you a very happy Thursday. Thanks and have a great day.